What's up, everyone? My name's Austin Glines, and I'm honored that you stopped in and just taking some time to decompress and be encouraged today. So let's hop in. Have you ever been stuck? Like maybe on a trip, you were going to Disney World, for example, and your tire pops and you're stuck on the side of the road. Happened to me, by the way. Or maybe you were leaving a haircut and you hit the curb really hard on the side and your tire pops. That was me driving this time, and yes, it happened. Or maybe you were out mudding and you get stuck in the mud because, your tire, you weren't that good. So you get stuck. That actually hasn't happened to me, by the way, gang gang. Or maybe you overestimated the power of your vehicle to get through a certain puddle or terrain and you got stuck. That also happened to me. So I was about 10 to 12 years old, and during my childhood, I grew up on a pecan/cattle farm. And it was my great-grandfather's farm, and he had this thing we called the mule, which the only thing I know how to compare it to is a super golf cart. Those golf carts that are made to go out hunting, to go, on the outdoors. So I got to drive this super golf cart as a 10 to 12-year-old, and I was the man. I would invite my friends over and be like, you want to go on the mule? Like, that's just funny when you think about it. Like, I was just so fired up to go on this thing. And it was the mule. That just makes it better. Or to me anyways. If it's not funny to you, I'm sorry. But, so I had a group of my friends. There was like 6 or 7 of us on this thing, and we were driving around. I was cruising. I was just a bomb.com, man. I was just living it up. And then we get to this puddle, all right? And so it's beside a lake. So we're driving beside this lake, which is on this side right here. And then on the other side, where the hill slopes down, there's this massive puddle. And I'm like, we're going to cross that because we're in the mule. And all my friends were like, man, I think that's too deep. I don't think we're going to be able to make it. So I get out. I walk down. I'm like, I see the bottom. It's all right. So I gas this mug. I gas it, and then we hit the puddle. And we get about halfway through. And then it stops. And then I'm like, welp. And I let go of the gas. Which, by the way, isn't a great thing to do. Because the moment I let my foot off the gas, that meant that water could flood the exhaust pipe and practically ruin the engine, and the mule was never the same. R.I.P. But I tell you that story to show that all of us get stuck at times. You've been stuck maybe before, but not like that. Maybe you felt a lack of purpose. Maybe you felt stuck in a dead-end job. Or your marriage just felt stuck. It would never get better. Maybe your friendship felt stuck, and that friendship would never return. Or you fill in the blank. You had this addiction that you would never get out of. You were stuck. But luckily, you're not alone in being stuck. Luckily, it's a human problem of getting stuck. For example, the Israelites, they traveled through the wilderness. They crossed the Red Sea. The Red Sea parted. All of Pharaoh's army and Pharaoh died while chasing them. And they got into the desert, into the wilderness. But they got stuck because they turned away and trusted in their own strength, their own power to get them through the wilderness, and did not trust God fully. And then 40 years pass by, a whole new generation comes around, led by Joshua. And they have the faith to cross. Joshua and these Israelites, this new generation, they are going to cross. They're going to possess the land. However, we see Joshua struggling with insecurity and worry and fear. But God tells him, do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. In Joshua chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. And Joshua takes that on. They get to the Jordan River. and it's at flood season. and there's no way across. However, this time they're not going to turn around. They're not going to stop short because they believe God is going to get them unstuck. So let's read Joshua chapter 3, verses 15 through 17. It was harvest season. The Jordan was overflowing its banks. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed onto the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Meanwhile, the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Lord's covenant stood on dry ground in the middle of the riverbed as the people passed by. They waited there until the whole nation of Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry ground. So I have a question. What do you think the difference was in between the Israelites who stopped short and stayed in the desert for 40 years and this generation of Israelites? How did one generation of Israelites get stuck? And then how did the others get unstuck? Because the first generation looked at the adversaries that were on the other side, that occupied what God had promised them, the opposition that was in their way. And they said, no, that's too much. But the new generation of the Israelites said, that's nothing. God is bigger than them. That's the difference. If you're stuck today, if you're stuck in grief, that maybe you lost a loved one and you have no idea how you're going to live another day, and you're hurt and you've gone through traumatic experiences, God's bigger than that experience. God has a life for you past this day. Keep living, keep going. God is bigger than this situation. If you maybe lost your job and you have no idea where your next paycheck's going to come from, have faith. God is going to get you past this opposition, past this hard time. God is bigger than your circumstance. Maybe your relationship with your wife feels stuck and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get past this. And your relationship maybe with a close friend seems ended. God is bigger and God can restore this relationship. The way that you can overcome where you feel stuck and cross into what God has promised you is trust in God. Have faith. This word faith is a believing loyalty. Believe God can and God wants to get you across and get you unstuck. And be loyal to God and live the way that He calls you to live, because God is telling you the way to get unstuck. You just have to be willing to submit to God's authority, and then He will exalt you up. That's the difference between these two generations. One submitted to God's authority, one did not. So ask yourself today, if you feel stuck, are you submitted to God's authority? Or are you trying to do it in your own power?